Bringing us up at number 5, we've got the Haunted Bionicle.
Yeah. Hang on, there's nothing up here. What the crap? There's nothing in here either, look.
Okay, so we're starting this one off a little unconventionally. I'm sure thousands of lonely little lads out there will yell, "They're not dolls, they're action figures." I know, I get it. But for the sake of outrageous creepitude, let's investigate the case of the moving Bionicle. Reddit user BleachPong shared a video of his brothers watching TV. If you can look past the extremely dusty Xbox, you'll see that they're reacting to some noises. Apparently, ever since they moved into their relatively new home, they'd heard strange noises at odd times. Most commonly, that of someone sifting through their tubs of Lego. This would happen most often when nobody was around to be making said racket. Over the years, this strange noise would consistently weird the brothers out. In fact, it happened so often that it became a bit of a legend between them and their friends. So, them considering this particular event isn't too outrageous to consider. Back to the dusty Xbox room, the two brothers hear a noise, plastic blocks being disturbed from their resting place. So they follow it to a long closet full of old toys. Quite an impressive collection of Lego, Transformers, Bionicles, and more. They open the door, flick on the lights, and film the inside of the room. Now, they don't notice it in the recording, but something very strange is going on at the back of the closet. Let's get that clip again.
There's nothing up here.
Did you see that? The big custom Bionicle moving its head? Well, it's not supposed to do that. Like I said before, they didn't really see it happen when recording, but upon reviewing the footage, they realized the chilling movement. After sharing it with the internet, they claimed that the neck joint was stiff and shouldn't be moving without outside influence. It also seems unlikely that pests like mice or rats could be causing all this ruckus, let alone moving just the head on a toy. So what do you think? Is the toy moving on its own, or is it something else entirely? Sneaking in at number 4, we've got Annabelle, the classic. How can you make a haunted dolls list without including Annabelle? It simply isn't done. The now Hollywood famous doll held captive at Ed and Lorraine Warren's occult museum for decades. Annabelle has been caught moving many times, even when behind the glass at the museum. There's just no stopping this evil plaything. She was first documented after being gifted to a young nursing student named Donna. Donna would treat the doll like a little girl even after odd things started happening. At first, Annabelle would just move around when no one was looking. Her arms and legs would cross and uncross, or her head would tilt at odd angles. If Donna and her roommate were gone long enough, they might even come back to find Annabelle in a totally new area. What really set their fear response off though was when Annabelle left pencil-written notes for them throughout the apartment. Messages like, "Help us," could be discovered in different parts of their home. The true terror began though when a boyfriend came to visit. Lou, who was dating Donna's roommate at the time, would come over from time to time. One night, after crashing on the couch like a respectable young man, Lou experienced a very strange occurrence. He felt the doll creeping up his leg. Terrified, he sat up and saw it attempting to strangle him. After this, he blacked out, and when he awoke, he just assumed it was a nightmare. The terror didn't end there though. Soon after, Annabelle snuck up on Lou and cut him, leaving distinct claw marks on his chest. The injuries healed over almost immediately though, leading people to think either one of two things. Either Lou was making it up, or Annabelle had mysterious powers. After these violent incidents, however, Donna had to believe the doll was up to something. She called a priest, who then encouraged her to contact the Warrens, and the rest is history. Laughing his way in at number 3, we've got Tickle Me Elmo. You could probably write a whole book on all the times Tickle Me Elmo has acted strange. There's something about bringing a giggling, wiggling, red fur-covered robot into your house that doesn't sit right with me. First introduced in the 90s, Tickle Me Elmo was a hot ticket item for families everywhere. Once this little red rapscallion made it into millions of homes, weird stories started cropping up. Folks would report that he was found in places that he should not have been able to access, or worse, moving without batteries in. The giggles and chuckles of the furry freak were heard throughout the night, even when it was left in a very much off position. So, what was happening? Well, in all likelihood, it was people imagining things or the electronics of a relatively primitive toy malfunctioning. But that didn't stop people from telling tall tales of the ticklish toy tormenting tots. Eventually though, the urban legends calmed down and the Tickle Me Elmo stories died out. That is, until a new edition was released. Back in 2008, there was a new version of the interactive toy hitting the shelves. Called Elmo Knows Your Name, this was a Tickle Me Elmo for the PC era. By connecting it to a personal computer, you could program the toy to repeat phrases and remember names. A novel idea for sure, but it became disturbing fast. Melissa Bowman, a mother who had bought her son the toy, claimed that it started to say something particularly disturbing. In a sing-song voice, Elmo started saying, "Kill James, kill James." Not exactly what you want to hear from a children's toy, especially when your kid's name is James. Young James even started repeating what Elmo was saying. Yikes. Melissa wasn't sure how the toy learned how to do that. Whether it was a prank or some faulty programming, we may never know. Coming in at number 2, we've got Robert the Doll. Another classic. Robert the Doll also managed to inspire a major doll-based horror movie franchise, but because they don't share the same name, he doesn't enjoy as much fame as Annabelle. The life-size figure was the inspiration for Chucky, star of the Child's Play series. Robert was originally given to Robert Eugene Gene Otto as a present when he was young. The details on who the doll came from are a little more fuzzy though. Some say it was a gift from his grandfather, which doesn't seem to corroborate the whole evil haunted bit. Others, however, claim that it came from an angry voodoo practicing maid who wanted to get revenge on Gene and his family for some misdeeds against her. Robert the Doll has been seen changing expressions and moving around on his own over the years. Some also say that he moved around other things and planted voodoo figures throughout the house. While most dolls have an origin story related to the death of somebody close, this one seems to have taken to life without any such morbidity. Dressed as Gene and sharing his first name, the doll would often get blamed for things Gene did. Apparently, this is what unlocked its supernatural powers. People in the house would tell stories of overhearing Gene talking to Robert and Robert talking back. These days, Robert is kept at the East Martello Museum in Key West, Florida. Visitors will often complain of post-visit misfortunes after seeing Robert. Those who fail to respect him often find themselves getting into car accidents, breaking bones, losing jobs, and having marital problems. Jeez, Robert, just let the people live. And finally, at number 1, we've got Ruby. The last haunted doll we'll discuss today is less terrifying and more tragic. She's not malicious or mean-spirited. In fact, she's apparently very sweet. But the effects she imposes on people around her are very strange indeed. Passed down over generations, Ruby is an old family heirloom. Apparently, years ago, a young girl died while holding this very doll. After she passed away, the doll will be found in all sorts of places all over the house. Folks would leave it in the living room and later find it in the kitchen. Sometimes it might even sneak up to a bedroom. In addition to moving around, Ruby would also leave people feeling blue and sad and even nauseous. Headaches, allergic reactions, and exhaustion were also reported. For years, nobody knew what to do with the doll. It was creepy. Nobody wanted it roaming around their house, making weird noise and causing people to feel ill. However, it did have the spirit of a deceased family member attached to it. So the family would pass it from member to member. Each person would deal with the weirdness for a little while, and then Ruby would move along to her next new home. After spending time in different family homes for years, Ruby made it to the Traveling Museum of the Paranormal and Occult. It was here that the ill effects seemed to subside, with sickness and headaches happening less often. These were replaced with much different feelings. Some visitors even reported familiar maternal feelings, even rocking Ruby back and forth like a real child. In fact, Ruby often brings people to tears with sudden, overwhelming affection. So the sweet little girl is still in there somewhere, looking to show people that she's not as evil as most make haunted dolls out to be. So, what did you think of the list? Looking at your figurines and playthings a little differently now? Which doll would you be okay with letting into your home?
Number 5 on this list is Okiku. Okiku is definitely one of the strangest haunted dolls out there and certainly has a unique curse to it. Curious Archive says, according to the story of Okiku, the doll was purchased by a 17-year-old boy named Eikichi Suzuki during a visit to Sapporo for a marine expedition in 1918. The doll was a gift from his travels for his 2-year-old sister named Okiku. In some versions of the story, she's called Kikuko. When she was initially purchased, the doll had a hairstyle called okappa, similar to a bob cut, which is popular on Japanese dolls. Okiku loved her new doll and it served as the little girl's companion until she died suddenly from a cold-like illness at the age of 3. Devastated by their loss, Okiku's family put her favorite doll on the household altar where they prayed in memory of Okiku. Before long, the family noticed that the hair on Okiku's doll had begun to grow, as if the hair was on the head of a human. The family concluded that the restless spirit of Okiku, who died so young, was now inside her beloved doll. The doll remained with Okiku's family until 1938, when they moved to Iwamizawa in Hokkaido and gave the doll to the Meniji Temple, where she remains enshrined to this day. She is now referred to as Okiku after her former owner. Some believe the hair that continues to grow from her head is the hair of the child, Okiku. The priest who goes and cuts Okiku's hair says that he receives messages from her. These messages appear to him through dreams. They aren't your typical weird dreams, though. They are so detailed and specific that he knows it's the work of the doll. He isn't the only one who receives dreams from this doll either. She sends messages to other people who live in this temple too, However, they aren't nearly as nice. Apparently, some individuals have had her attack them in their dreams. This is very similar to another doll on this list that we'll get to later. Dolls that can target you through your sleep are especially dangerous, as that's when you're most vulnerable. Truly don't know why we keep giving the evil demon haircuts and don't instead just give it a nice little trip to the dump. Number 4 on this list is Robert the Doll. Do not take this thing's picture without its permission. If you do, then bad things are going to be coming pretty soon. The Travel Channel says, Robert came to the Otto family of Key West, Florida in the early 1900s as a gift to their youngest son, Robert Eugene Otto. The boy and doll became inseparable, with the child often laying blame for his misdeeds on the doll. The family alleged that the toy often seemed to change positions of its own accord. They also claimed that when their son was alone in his room, they could hear him conversing with the doll, and the doll responding in a completely different voice. After Eugene's death in 1974, Robert was given to the East Martello Museum. Visitors who have taken his picture without permission claim to have experienced terrible misfortune as a result of their transgressions. Robert is surrounded by letters of apology and admiration. These letters of apology are basically last-ditch efforts by people to try and get rid of the curse that befalls them for doing anything that Robert doesn't like. I have no idea if these letters work or not, or if it's case-by-case basis. The only thing that I do know is that most dolls you take a picture of don't require you to later come back to them and beg for forgiveness. The original owner, Robert Eugene Otto, died in 1974, and a lot of people believe that this doll started getting evil after that. It lost its best friend and is now taking its grief out on anyone or anything that comes in contact with it. Best course of action for you? Don't come in contact with it. Number 3 on this list is Lily. Now residing at Zach Bagans of Ghost Adventures Haunted Museum, Lily was made during the 1800s in Germany and features real human hair. According to the museum's Facebook post, she was discovered by an antiques dealer who took her home but began having recurring nightmares about a little girl who had a very bad accident. She was subsequently put up for sale at the antique shop. On one occasion, a customer's little girl spoke to the doll for 3 hours, interacting with her like a fellow child. She informed the proprietor that Lily was a little girl that had been subjected to extreme violence. When first encountering the doll, Baggins reported that he felt an immense energy radiating from the figure. So basically, if you keep this doll, then you will get haunted with countless nightmares. I have no idea how this doll managed to survive this long and somebody hasn't just burned this thing hot. Like, don't get me wrong, I feel bad about what went down in the 1800s. Whichever girl's spirit is haunting this doll, whatever happened to her, it sounds horrible and it never should have happened in the first place. But maybe destroying this doll wouldn't even be a bad thing. Maybe she keeps giving people nightmares so that people will finally feel the need to get rid of her. I obviously don't know, but I'm just guessing that being trapped in a doll for over 200 years probably isn't the best experience. Number 2 on this list is the Shadow Doll. I recently spoke about the Shadow Doll in a video looking at demons that Ed and Lorraine Warren were scared of. It needs to be brought up again though, because any demon that's going to scare those two people is obviously scary enough to get any of us. Scare Street says, the Warrens' files do not state why this horrible doll was created in the first place. However, they do state that it was used in satanic rituals and it was created by black magic using human and animal bones. It's rumored that if a picture were to be taken of the doll, it would project itself into the dreams of the person who dared to look at it in the eye. However, it's not only a simple dream. The dream would be so intensely nightmarish that the victims would either suffer from a heart attack or forever be frightened of sleep because of the horrifying looking doll. The files even state that there were a few deaths caused by it. The Shadow Doll was later found in an antique shop and oddly enough, a couple purchased it. After the purchase, the couple began to encounter the eeriest of nightmares. They later found out that they were experiencing the same nightmares of the cursed doll and that the husband had scratches all over his back and neck which could only be traced back to the Shadow Doll. How could you ever go to sleep with this thing in your house? Like, falling asleep is basically a death sentence if you've ever interacted with this doll in person. What I want to know is where this thing came from. Like, we know that it was made using black magic, but by who? Was it some sort of witch that created this? A satanic cult? Was it the devil himself or a demon of sorts? Who made this doll and what is its purpose? If we could figure that out, then we might have a better chance at not only understanding this specific doll, but maybe others that are like it. Sadly, I don't think that the Shadow Doll is going to be letting us in on its secrets anytime soon. And finally, number 1 on this list is Letta. As far as looks go, this thing is definitely number 1 on any list of creepy looking things. The Travel Channel says, short for Letta Me Out, Letta is a 200-year-old wooden doll with human hair. He was discovered beneath a house in Wagga Wagga, Australia by his current caretaker, Kerry Walton. Walton told the Warwick Daily News, "I reckon he walks in the nighttime. We came in here as a new house and I've never heard so many strange things in my life." He's found scuff marks on the floor of his home as well as objects mysteriously shifted. Walton has brought Letta with him to multiple television interviews and has started an Instagram page dedicated to the doll. Kerry, my guy, what are we doing here, man? Apparently he has said that multiple people have seen this doll move before and it just walks around the house like it owns the damn place. I took a look at the Instagram page that this guy has for his doll and it's just so creepy. Like, the way that this thing looks, I can't possibly imagine having it in my own home. Some people have rumored that Kerry is actually under the control of this doll and that he's brainwashed. A lot of people can't wrap their heads around the fact that someone in their right mind would want to keep and promote something like this, so that's why it's possible he's actually being told to do it by the doll itself. The only people who know for sure, though, would be Kerry and Letta, I guess.
Number 5. Okiku. Have you ever wanted to cut a doll's hair? Did you have a Barbie growing up that you gave a haircut to and were surprised when it didn't quite work out the way you'd hoped? Not that that ever happened to me with any of my sister's Barbies or anything. Anyway, if that's your fancy, maybe this haunted doll would be right up your alley. Okiku is a doll of Japanese urban myth. A possessed doll that seemingly endlessly grows real human hair. Disgusting. Okiku is a fairly prominent doll in Japanese stories, and as such, there are several conflicting legends and details, so I'll do my best to kind of squish them all up and compile them the way I can. It's said that she was first bought in Hokkaido in 1918 by a young man named Ikishi Suzuki, who had purchased the doll for his sister, Kikuko. Kikuko loved the doll and carried it with her everywhere at all times, and was never seen without her. She bathed with her, she slept with her, she ate with her. They were inseparable. Tragically though, Kikuko died suddenly of a sickness that came on very fast. The family was stricken with grief, and as such made a small shrine to their daughter in the house, with the doll featuring on top of it for something to pray to. They named it Okiku, in remembrance of their lost daughter. It was after this they started to notice something deeply bizarre, as the doll's hair began to grow. What was once a pretty simple bob hairstyle for a little doll grew longer and longer past the doll's body. The family took this as proof that the doll was inhabited by their daughter's spirit. Eventually, Kikuko's father passed on Okiku and gave her away to Menenji Temple to be cared for, since his family had to move to the mainland for work. It's here where Okiku still resides, where you can go and visit her actually. You can see her for yourself to offer her your blessings. A priest residing at the temple says that he has visions where Okiku speaks to him, asking him to cut her hair. And as far as all the things a haunted doll could tell you in your dreams, just asking to have her hair cut is pretty easy, so it's probably pretty wise to do it. One thing though, if you do visit, Okiku has kindly asked for no photos, so just be polite, be respectful, and ask if maybe she wants a few inches off the top when you go. And if you're looking for more stories of cursed objects, haunted relics, ghosts, goblins, aliens, demons, angels, creepypastas, and regular pastas, Top 5 Scary has all of that and way more than you can imagine. Drop a subscribe or a like and don't miss a single scream. Number 4. Letta. Usually with haunted dolls, I'd say the creep factor comes from that uncanny valley, you know? You look at it and you know it's supposed to be sweet and innocent, but it's harboring a dark secret. Well, no such thing is happening here. You can take one single look at Letta and you're like, yeah, that is a cursed doll. That is an evil, evil doll. Just looking at it through a screen radiates anger. Letta, which is apparently short for Letta Me Out, is living in Australia, and to paranormal enthusiasts is one of the more haunted dolls on the planet. Letta was found in the town of Wagga Wagga, and yeah, I had to Google that to make sure that was a real place. It's in New South Wales. It was 1970, and Kerry Walton was doing a bit of urban exploration with his brother, exploring abandoned houses to see what sort of urban treasures they could bring back. Sounds like some boyhood fun. Among one of the decaying properties, they found what they initially thought was a body, but upon digging, were way more excited to find a doll with a sadistic grin. Now, like any good treasure hunter, Walton was thrilled with his find. Imagine going into an abandoned house that'd been boarded up and finding a terrifying, creepy doll underneath the floorboards and not immediately recognizing that you were in the start to a horror movie and burning it, but taking it home. Different strokes for different folks, I guess. Carrie and his brother drove the doll back to Brisbane, naming her Letta Me Out because they joked that it seemed like she was wriggling around in the back seat. That seems like a clear red flag and a warning sign, guys. They brought it home, and immediately after they did, started to notice strange things. Scuffs all over the floors that seemingly matched up with Letta's little shoes. As well, they said that looking at it too long would start to make them feel sick, and that dogs seemed to have a strong aversion to the doll, seemingly able to sense the evil energy inside. You don't need to have a dog's nose to take one look at this thing and be able to smell the evil. Like I said, I can feel it through a computer screen, let alone in my face. Experts think the doll is over 200 years old and was crafted in Romania somewhere. But not much more than that is known, other than the fact that it's got a head of human hair and it is extremely terrifying. Letta has a surprisingly pretty active social media presence if you're interested in following a haunted doll on Instagram, and sometimes even does like tours to pose with fans. If you're into that sort of thing, if you're into that haunted doll celebrity status, let me be the first to say, I'll keep my distance. I did a little pun there. I don't know, that's just for the scholars at home. Number 3. Ruby. Ruby the doll is a doll living in the Traveling Museum of the Paranormal with a cursed history. I mean, of course, they don't make the dolls cursed out of the factory. At least, I don't think so. Tickle Me Elmo is a different case, though. She was an inaugural part of the museum, and since its opening has been a beloved sight to terrify guests. Ruby found her way into the Traveling Museum when a friend of the curator had discovered her in her home. She had been tucked away in a dusty old attic, which is like a haunted doll's least favorite place to be, wedged right between the Christmas decorations. She had been a treasured heirloom at some point generations ago in the Matthews family. Ruby initially belonged to a girl in the Matthews family who passed a long time ago holding Ruby in her arms. The family thought that in that moment, the spirit passed into the doll Ruby where it has stayed ever since. Ruby passed from generation to generation of the family, afraid that if they were to throw her out or get rid of her, there would be serious repercussions, afraid that there was still a soul inside. Now, according to the family, Ruby seemed far more lively than her porcelain would suggest. She seemed able to move around the room by herself, and they would report all sorts of creepy, bizarre sounds coming up from the attic. The family thought too that Ruby was making them sick, as they complained having her around was making people feel like they had headaches, allergies, extreme nausea, and feelings of violent paranoia, which usually if something in your home is causing you to do that, you would get rid of it. So the owner, Dana Matthews, was very tired of the fact that she felt like she had the spirit of a long dead relative that was always haunting and peering over their shoulders, and tried to call in a psychic to help the spirit pass on. After an exorcism, the Matthews were still being haunted by the doll and saw a good opportunity to pass it on to the Traveling Museum of the Paranormal, where she now still resides. The curators have said she's a very popular attraction, and guests find themselves overwhelmed with inexplicable feelings holding the doll and rocking it, feeling compelled to feel close and protect her. Do you think the spirit of that girl is still inside Ruby? I'm getting weird vibes just looking at pictures, and I'm never wrong about my vibes. Number 2. Robert. Now, Annabelle is the undisputed queen of the haunted doll game. Not to spoil too much about who number 1 is going to be, but you had to guess it was going to be her, right? Well, the runner-up for the second most famous haunted doll has got to go out to Robert the doll. His black, lifeless, beady little eyes have been serving up scares for the better part of a century, and we wonder if there's anything more beyond those little Funko Pop eyes. There's a bit of a back and forth debate as to the true origins of Robert the doll. Like any good urban legend, it's a bit of a choose-your-own adventure. All anyone can really agree on is that it was owned by someone named Robert Jean Otto. No one's even really sure where the doll came from, as efforts to find its original manufacturer have proven fairly fruitless. In some variations of the story, the doll was given to Otto by a servant who wanted to curse the family out of revenge. And in some versions, it was just given to him by his grandfather, who was just getting his grandson a cute little toy and was unaware of the possible evils within it. Either way you slice it, what's important is that Robert Jean Otto, who preferred to go by Otto, owned this little doll, and it was his best friend. Otto had a very active imagination, in a way that started to scare his parents. You know when your teachers call you in for a little bit of a parent-teacher interview to talk about your worrying crayon hand-drawn drawings, that's kind of what was going on here. He would speak of this doll as it was a living thing, claiming that it would speak to him, tell him to do things. When mishaps or accidents around the house would happen, Otto would tell his parents that it was because Robert had commanded him to do it, or Robert himself had done it. Neighborhood kids too would say that they saw Robert moving from the windows when they walked by. Otto would grow up to be a prominent local artist and kept Robert with him until the day of his death in 1974. From then on, Robert found himself in the possession of the new owners of the old Otto estate, who claimed that they found him disturbing, that they saw his face move, that they would hear him stomping around, and that misfortune fell to those who insulted the doll. Eventually, they found it to be a bit much, and donated him to the Key West Art and Historical Society, where he became one of the most popular attractions. He's kept under a very tight lock and key, and it's said that those who disrespect him face his wrath. As such, Robert gets all sorts of fan mail and offerings from those who are hoping to be blessed or to get him to curse someone for them. And Robert, all that stuff I was saying earlier about you having lifeless eyes or Funko Pop eyes, that's just like joking between friends. You know that, right? Like, you know we're really close. You know I've always deeply respected you, and I love your little sailor outfit. Number 1, Annabelle. Well, I did kind of give it away in that last one, but yeah, come on, number 1 had to be Annabelle. It's a little cliche, maybe, but I was kind of worried that I might invoke her wrath by insulting her if I put her any lower, and I'm not looking to upset any more haunted dolls than I already have. Annabelle is kind of the breakout star of the cursed doll community, getting that sweet Conjuring franchise money and just raking it in on that spin-off and all her convention appearances and cameos. But how did she get her start as a humble haunted doll? The story goes that in the 1970s, a young nurse received Annabelle as a gift from her mother. She put Annabelle on top of the bed after making it, and Annabelle was cute little home decor. And she does look sweet, doesn't she? They really did her dirty in the movies when you see the real Annabelle, eh? They made her look evil. The owner and her roommate weren't as won over though, and they claimed that they felt creepy around Annabelle, and that they would feel like they noticed it moving. At first, small stuff, you know, showing up in a place they hadn't left her and so on. Annabelle turned the heat up a little bit when they discovered handwritten notes around the apartment. Scary messages that said things like, "Help me," which is never a good thing to discover if you have a haunted doll in your home, and probably not a good thing to discover ever. Naturally, this started to concern them deeply, peaking when they came home one day to discover Annabelle dripping in blood, fresh and bright red all over her hands. Now, for some reason, they didn't just burn Annabelle and torch the whole place down, but instead they were scared and had a male friend stay over, as they were all pretty freaked out. He claimed that one night, while sleeping over, he woke up and saw the doll sitting on his chest, her hands around his neck, and he woke up in a blinding panic, unsure if what he had seen was real or a dream. After that incident, everybody's favorite Connecticut demonologists, Ed and Lorraine Warren, were called in to claim Annabelle, where they could deal with the entity properly. They soaked her in holy water and sealed her away in a glass case inside their museum, where she resides when she's not taken out for one of her many convention appearances or red carpet looks. From humble beginnings to superstardom, Annabelle, we love ya.
Kicking off the list at number 5, we have the clown doll from Poltergeist. This one gave me nightmares growing up, like for sure. Poltergeist was released in 1982, the original, directed by Toby Hopper and written by Steven Spielberg. It tells the story of a family that was haunted by, well, yeah, a poltergeist. These things come in many shapes and sizes, and of the hauntings that occurred, came in the form of a clown sometimes. So this movie already has some scary history behind it, plot aside. Like the fact that they used real bones instead of fake ones for filming, and then the fact that the cast and crew members had actually died in real life. So the son Robbie has a clown toy, which is just what we all grew up with. Now, horror movie or not, I would never have this near me or my children. That's just a fact, especially one that looks like this. Okay, Robbie has the right idea here. Try covering the clown with like a jacket or something. I mean, yeah, of course. That thing is huge though. You would need like 5 jackets just to cover that thing and be fully at ease. So this clown doll is meant as a distraction so that the dark spirits could actually abduct Carol Ann. But this scene is so frightening that whenever people remember this movie, like myself, we all think of this scene instead. This thing is nuts. I used to hate looking under my bed for this reason. And it didn't help that I watched this when I was super young. Thanks, Mom and Dad. Awesome. Since then, the clown has been parodied numerous times, most famously from Scary Movie 2. I don't care how many times we laugh about it, this toy still gives me nightmares. I think because he's big. Like some creepy dolls are just like a foot tall or whatever. This dude is like wrapping his arm around Robbie's neck. He's like a lanky guy. If I went toe to toe with him, like, this guy's got some reach, I don't know. And before we head on over to number 4 on our list, don't forget to give this video a nice thumbs up because it really helps us out here at the studio. Thank you so much. Okay, back to some awful toys. Number 4, Chucky. Making his debut back in Child's Play in 1988, Chucky is one of the most popular horror movie antagonists ever, with 8 movies now about his horrible ways. We've all imagined being friends with our toys. Maybe if you grew up an only child, you would find yourself comforted by some of the stuffed animals. When Child's Play hit theaters, this comforting idea was shattered. Child's Play tells the dark tale of serial killer Charles Lee Ray, who was actually named after 3 different real-life murderers. Nice touch. He uses voodoo to transfer his soul into the popular child's doll, Chucky. So once he finds his new body, he realizes that he's immortal, and he has the strength of a full-grown adult. He also loves the new role. He likes killing a lot. It's really twisted. He's smart too, like he knows what he is and he uses it to his advantage. It's not like a haunted artifact where things close to it become haunted. No, this is the soul of a serial killer. He's the same guy, he just has a small body, very small. A character like this is such a good call for horror movies, because everybody has the idea that their toys can talk at some point in their life. Like when Toy Story came out, I grilled my Beanie Babies, like hard too. I'm like, look, if you can talk, just tell me. I'm 7 years old, you can trust me with anything. I'm not gonna tell anybody. I would have told everybody. But what upped the slasher game was when the new Child's Play movie came out, where Chucky uses technology to help him take out his victims. So this is a character that is so human-like, you could just throw him in any decade and he'll still kill it. Pun intended. I feel like I can take him, I don't know. I got these long legs. That guy can try and get close, but I mean, I'm just gonna hoof this dude back in time. Like I said, yo, it's Tim season now, I got some Timberland boots. Good luck, dude, good luck. The credits of the original Child's Play were supposed to include this creepy theme song about Chucky, with the lyrics, "Chucky, Chucky, go away, you're too rowdy when you play." Awesome, with fun cheering in the background too, for good measure. They decided to take it out because it was too over the top. I mean, the last thing we need is to be humming that on the bus subconsciously. No way am I letting that get stuck in my head. Not today. Number 3, Billy, Dead Silence. So before Aquaman and The Conjuring was released in theaters, director James Wan teamed up with horror writer Leigh Whannell to make Dead Silence. This film was released in 2007 and should have done a lot better with the ratings. Dead Silence packs all the punches you need for a solid horror movie. We got creepy dolls, we got angry ghosts, Donnie Wahlberg as a detective. Nice. Like, you can't go wrong here. It's fine. It's good fun all around. But in Dead Silence, we follow the life of a widow named Jamie Ashen, who returns to his hometown, Raven's Fair, for the funeral of his late wife. His wife had received a creepy package containing a ventriloquist doll named Billy, nice, and was found murdered only minutes after, not nice. Okay, so at this point, I don't care who you are, if something like this happens in a town, guess what? Surprise, you're moving. Congrats on the decision. Wishing you great things in the future. Cheers. Get the f out of here. Now, obviously, Jamie is a prime suspect in the murder, so he decides to unravel this mystery while he's in Raven's Fair. And this is when things start to get a little bit weird. So back in the 1940s, local ventriloquist Mary Shaw was the talk of Raven's Fair. That wasn't until a young boy heckled her during her show and exposed her whole ventriloquist act. Nice, gotta love hecklers. Good one! Kidding, don't haunt me. Oh my god. The townsfolk didn't react too well to Mary being a fraud, so they hunted her down and cut out her tongue and left her for dead, instead of leaving a bad Yelp review. Okay. As if that wasn't alarming enough, the townsfolk buried her with her children, and by children I mean her disgustingly creepy dolls. And as time passes, Mary begins to seek revenge on all those who did her dirty, using the evil doll as help.
To construct the perfect doll.
Number 2, Billy, Saw. Hey, here we are, back to another Billy, with another doll, with Leigh Whannell. This is great. Can I just say the name Billy is done now? Like, I can't hear that name and not immediately get creeped out, you know? My dad's name is Bill, and that's already way too close to this classic evil doll name. Saw was released back in 2004, and what started off as a low-budget horror film is now one of the most popular franchises ever, with a new title, Spiral, on the way. So it's safe to say that something about watching people get tortured is working. But one of the main characters that stuck in our heads after we saw the first movie was Billy the Puppet. This Billy is scarier than the other Billies, I think. Maybe it's because our boy John Kramer used him as a vessel to relay these horrible messages. This was the initial thought when it came to the Saw franchise. Before all the sequels started pouring out, this doll was the scariest part, kind of. So when John Kramer and his wife Jill were expecting a baby, John went out and bought this small wooden puppet as a gift for the birth of their coming son, Gideon. Jill was hurt during a robbery and unfortunately the child didn't make it, so John became very close to the doll. He was emotionally attached. This was one of the few memorabilia left from their unborn child. Now after that he spent most of his time alone in the workshop, obviously extremely depressed, with the doll by his side, divorcing Jill along the way. So Jill and their lawyer, Art Blank, went to go visit John and see how he's doing in his workshop of sadness. And while there, Art accidentally knocks Billy off a table. We then see John pick up the doll and start to stroke its hair. It's super sad, but the design of the doll makes it super creepy. Billy was a super popular Halloween costume after these movies came out. I remember seeing tons of pranks where people would just roll up on a tricycle. You didn't have to say anything, people were already afraid. They knew what was up. In a movie about torture and revenge, they did a pretty smart move by using this doll as a mascot, and it kind of ties into the plot in a smooth way. And then we see an updated version of this doll in 2017's Jigsaw. And finally at number 1, you guessed it, Annabelle. I saved our favorite for last because it's based off of a real life haunting. Annabelle scares the shit out of me. For real, Annabelle was released in 2014 and was directed by John Leonetti, and since then there have been connections to the Conjuring movies as they share one terrifying universe. Crafted from the minds of James Wan, of course. Annabelle the doll is actually the second antagonist in The Conjuring, so she's a pretty big deal. So Annabelle is a powerful demonic entity that latches itself onto a porcelain doll, terrifying the owners. So Ed and Lorraine Warren are real people. These are real stories. They just also happen to be fantastic horror films as well. The actual Annabelle doll looks less scary, I think? I mean, she looks less likely to murder you, if that helps, I don't know. Ed and Lorraine Warren got the doll from a student nurse in 1970. They had told the Warrens that the doll was behaving suspiciously, and then a psychic told the students that the doll is indeed the vessel being used by a spirit, or a deceased girl named Annabelle. So the student and her roommate heard this and thought, okay, we're just gonna try and take care of the spirit, nurture it almost. The doll, on the other hand, had different intentions. Annabelle would often display malicious and frightening behavior. Also, no, I would not try and nurture a haunted doll. If a psychic told me that, I wouldn't even stick around for a second. I wouldn't even pay. I'd be like, thank you so much. Here's my belongings, just take everything. I'm gonna disappear. The doll itself was deemed demonically possessed by the Warrens. That's like a verified badge, but for demons. When Annabelle Comes Home was released, The Hollywood Reporter spoke to Tony Spera, the real-life occult museum curator and an actual son-in-law of Ed and Lorraine Warren. Spera confirmed that the Annabelle doll is accurately portrayed in the films. Huh? The main difference being the appearance. That's it. Lorraine Warren even says looks are deceiving. It's not what the doll looks like that makes it scary, it's what it has been infused with inside the doll. So sleep in fear, folks. There you go.
Coming in at 5, Furby. This creepy tale comes from Reddit user GRZMNKY, who said, I quote, "A friend bought me a Furby as a joke while we were stationed in Germany. The one she got me was red and black and evil looking. Fast forward a couple weeks after losing interest in the thing, I'm sleeping and I suddenly hear this demonic gravelly voice come from my bookshelf. Not the sound of batteries running out, but a seriously demonic voice. I jump up and turn on the lights and search for the sound. I hear it coming from the top shelf, and when I look, nothing is there. Suddenly I hear the voice behind me, and the little bastard is sitting on top of my wall locker, just repeating this ka 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 a sound. Then it says, hello my son, I miss you. I immediately took it out to the burn pit and cleansed it with fire. It screamed as it burned. I can still hear those screams 10 years later. Whoa, okay. I truly hope this story is legitimate because it's absolutely horrifying. I love it. A plausible answer to the demonic Furby could be that the friend who gifted the Furby perhaps replaced its voice recording with their own as a way to freak out their friend, although I'm assuming after 10 years the friend would eventually admit to it, unless they're playing the long game, which I respect. Coming in at number 4, A Song in the Middle of the Night. This story comes to us from Reddit user Alira1228, who said, when I was like 7 or 8, my dad gave me a Madame Alexander doll, which started my love of beautiful porcelain dolls. My mum's boyfriend learned this and got me a cheap porcelain doll for Christmas. It had one of those wind up things on the back and would play Sweet Child of Mine. I liked it at first until in the middle of the night it would just start playing. by itself. It moved to the very back of my closet after that, and then I left it there when I took my sister's room when she moved out. My brother, who inherited the old room, said he found the doll because he would hear it playing in the middle of the night too. I mean, I can imagine after a dozen times of hearing Sweet Child of Mine it would get annoying. I assume what happened here was the cheap doll had some sort of malfunction in its system, or some wires were crossed, or it was possessed. One of those things. Coming in at number 3, She's Watching You. This story comes to us from Reddit user Twatwaffle83. Great name, by the way. They said, you know those cheap plastic dolls that you can get at craft stores that you can knit or crochet elaborate dresses for? Popular with grannies. My mum received one of those dolls with purple dress from an elderly neighbour lady not long before the lady passed away. My mum had a blue armchair in her bedroom and had the doll sitting on it. She always kept the door open. Every time I would pass her room, the doll would turn its head to look at me. My nephew, who's not much younger than me, experienced the same thing. I had nightmares about that doll. I just hated it. Eventually my mum gave it away and I was beyond relieved. Yep, that's terrifying. Just the idea that some people have experienced in the flesh their toys or dolls moving is horrifying. I would have burned that doll the moment its little head turned. No thank you. Coming in at number 2, the bunny. This one comes to us from Reddit user IcePhoenix18, who said, I had a little plush bunny from Easter that played music when you squeezed its tummy. I kept it in a drawer in my closed closet. One morning at 5 AM I woke up to something landing on my stomach. It was the bunny, playing the music incredibly slowly. I got up and threw it into the hall because it scared me. When my mum came to wake me up, I asked her if it was still there. Nope, she still doesn't remember anything to do with that bunny 12 years later. Well, I mean, experiencing a toy come to life is one thing, but knowing your family have zero recollection of the doll ever even existing is another. Was it all an elaborate dream, or was this a possessed bunny currently seeking out its next victim? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And lastly, in at number 1, the floppy bear. Our last story comes to us once again from Reddit, uploaded by Zanky. They said, when I was a little kid I used to sleep with a bed full of soft toys. I had my large bears and Noah, the awesome polar bear that has never left my side since I got him. I fell asleep after a few hours of being trapped in my room, but something woke me up after my mum had gone to bed. It was very early in the morning, 1 to 2 AM, and I could hear something. I stayed very still and listened. Then I felt it. One of my soft toys climbed over me and slid off the side of the bed and onto the floor with a thud. I tried to catch it moving, but it was just standing next to my bed. It was a floppy toy bear, so it couldn't stand on its own. I grabbed it and asked it what it was doing. It didn't say anything or move. I dumped it back on the bed and fell back to sleep after a while. I made sure all the dolls and soft toys apart from Noah left my room after that. I've tried to rationalize it since. I was still pretty young when it happened, under 10, but I remember it so clearly. I was not dreaming. I know I wasn't. I had a rabbit but wasn't hurt. She slept in her hutch outside in the summer and nothing had gotten into the house. She also didn't move like I had felt either. I don't know what else it could have been. This happened before I saw a black hooded thing standing next to my bed one morning, but after something had woken me up, scratching my leg in the night. Whatever that was bolted when it realized I was awake. It was small. I thought it was my dead guinea pig, that he was upset with me because he died. But now I'm not so sure. Well, this story went on a journey that I was not expecting. I mean, the dark figure makes sense. Many people experience sleep paralysis during the night, with images from their dreams spilling over into the awake state. But to assume it is your dead guinea pig is a whole other thing that I can't quite explain. And then the toy standing up on its own, creepy. No thank you. Again, I'm going with some sort of sleep paralysis experience, but what do you guys think?
Kicking off at number 5, the video game in Brain Scan 1994.
Whatever happens is up to you, but don't let your time run out.
I do.
Game over. You lose.
Alright guys, it was the 90s. It was a time before anyone truthfully knew the scale of the impact that technology would have on our lives, and it was a time when video games were still looked at as a thing that inadvertently rotted children's brains. Come on guys, you've got TV for that. Well, in the case of Brain Scan, they didn't just rot their brains, but this video game turned them into a straight up psychopathic killer without them even realizing it. Written and directed by Brian Owens and John Flynn respectively, Brain Scan tells the tale of Michael Brower, played by Edward Furlong, aka John Connor himself, a lonely kid who lives an isolated existence in his absent father's mansion. Turns out that Michael is a huge fan of horror films and video games, and his buddy tells him about a brand new, ultra realistic, cutting edge game called Brain Scan. Of course, he sends off for the disc and unwittingly summons a demonic game show host known as the Trickster, who coerces Michael into murdering his friends and family. Yeah, pretty cutting edge technology. Sorry, that was a terrible Terrible pun. Swinging in at number 4, The Masks from Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. Yeah, kind of goes without saying really, a demonic children's novelty Halloween mask that when worn whilst watching a specific TV commercial on the night of Halloween, inadvertently sacrifices them in an ancient Celtic ritual, thus bringing about a resurrection of the ancient age of witchcraft. Yeah, the third installment of Halloween wasn't exactly the golden age of horror cinema, but it was interesting nonetheless. As the events of the film explain, Halloween 3's antagonistic business villain, a man known as Conal Cochran, runs the Silver Shamrock Novelties Company and produces a wildly popular series of latex jack-o'-lantern, witch and skeleton toy masks for Halloween, and he's also made a pretty penny whilst doing so. Turns out each of these masks contain a fragment of Stonehenge implanted in a microchip, and when activated by the commercial's flashing magic pumpkin, it causes the wearer's brains to melt and then unleashes a swarm of snakes and insects out of the victim's corpse that try and kill anybody nearby. Sorry, what? Next up at number 3, the Annabelle doll. Annabelle. And you were just waiting for this little demon doll to turn up, weren't you? Because it can't be a scariest demonic toys list without Annabelle. And why anyone would ever be cruel enough to stick this abomination in front of an innocent child, I have no idea. Although the original doll that Annabelle is based on is a much more timid Raggedy Ann doll. Making her first appearance in James Wan's 2013 showstopper The Conjuring, Annabelle was such a demonic hit that she's gone on to spawn her own feature film, a much better prequel, and an upcoming 2029 sequel. As the events of the first film explain, Annabelle is a rare vintage porcelain doll that has a habit of demonically possessing anyone near its vicinity, and it's implicitly tied to a cult that is hell-bent on summoning in supernatural beings to our realm. Along the way, Annabelle kind of becomes a bit of a Russian doll of demonic host upon demonic host, but it's not until the events of Annabelle Origin where we learn that the toy itself was created by a toy maker named Samuel Mullins for his daughter, Annabelle. Tragically, she was later killed in a car accident, and her parents then accidentally summoned an infernal demon in their grief, who chose the convenient porcelain doll as its vessel. Why is it never like a plastic duck or a Furby? Actually, scratch that. Furbies are terrifying. Coming up next at number 2, the Lament Configuration Hellraiser.
What's your pleasure, Mr. Cotton?
The box.
The definition of curiosity killing the cat, and you'd be really unfortunate to ever mistake this thing for a Rubik's Cube, because that'd be really bad. Well, turns out that the Lament Configuration, which is seemingly an ancient puzzle box making up an entire collection of the same boxes that appear throughout Clive Barker's Hellraiser series, and also just so happen to summon a gash's worth of Cenobites to your door once you've completed the puzzle. In the fictional canon, the boxes were created by Philippe Le Marchand, a French toy maker who makes the Lament Configuration for a wealthy aristocrat who is obsessed with dark magic. To make the box, Le Marchand and his servant Jacques kill a woman and remove her inner organs and use the woman's skin to summon the demon princess Angelique. Well, yeah, that kind of sets the precedent for the rest of Clive Barker's amazing Cenobite Hellraiser series, and thus anytime someone unwittingly starts playing with the Lament Configuration, you just know that Pinhead, the Chatterer and Butterball are far behind. This demonic puzzle box has seen some real history throughout the Hellraiser franchise, at one point being solved by a robot at the space station Minos in the year 2127 during the events of Hellraiser 4 Bloodline. Yeah, things get a little weird. But there is one thing you can say about the Lament Configuration: it's pretty damn durable. And finally, our number 1 spot, the Good Guys doll, Child's Play.
I am a vintage, mass-marketed children's toy from the 80s, standing right in front of you, holding a very sharp scalpel.
And of course, because it really can't be a demonic toys list without Chucky rearing his cute little latex head. And it's on the Good Guys company to accept responsibility for this retail disaster, really, because even after the events of the first Child's Play film, they found themselves attempting to repair their public image, despite the fact that one of their dolls had been possessed by Charles Lee Ray, aka the Lakeshore Strangler, aka Chucky, in a bizarre voodoo ritual whilst avoiding prison, who then went on a 7-movie homicidal killing spree. You'd think they'd just kind of give up the ghost, right? Well, as we all know, in the events of the first Child's Play created by Don Mancini and first released in 1988, all little Andy Barclay wants is a good guy doll. Until his hard-working single mother manages to find one dirt cheap, being sold by a homeless guy down an alleyway. Well, yeah, it turns out that this doll in particular is the demonic vessel for the serial killer known as Chucky, and what plays out is one of the most captivatingly original cult horror slashers in recent memory. It's also absolutely hilarious.
Starting off at number 5, we've got the differences between reality and fiction. So this part may not be haunting per se, but it is good to know the difference between the real doll and her movie star counterpart. First of all, the real Annabelle is a Raggedy Ann doll, not an intricate porcelain piece. Definitely not as creepy to look at, but looks can be deceiving. It would be much harder to market a movie with a Raggedy Ann doll as the titular character, so the studio made some concessions. However, the button-eyed fiend is still pretty creepy. Lorraine Warren once said in an interview that it's not what the doll looks like that makes it scary, it's what's been infused within the doll, evil. That's as convincing an argument as you're gonna get about why you should fear a little girl made of fabric. Which is the creepier iteration, raggedy or ornate? Sound off in the comments. The case the doll is kept in differs a bit as well. In the movie, Annabelle is propped up within a gigantic glass case, almost like the display at a modern museum installation. In the Warrens' Occult Museum, the box is a little less fancy. It's a wooden case with a glass window to display the doll. On top is a crucifix meant to keep the demon at bay, and below the showcase is a hand-painted sign warning folks not to open or disturb it. The sign, as well as a tarot card depicting the devil, are more or less identical in both iterations. Beyond these mostly stylistic changes, Annabelle is supposedly represented quite accurately in the movies. From the precautions people take around the doll to her shadowy backstory, Annabelle seems to have an on-screen presence consistent with her own. Swooping in at number 4, we've got Annabelle's origins. So Annabelle was discovered by the Warrens while under the care of a pair of 2 nurses living together in Hartford, Connecticut. One of these nurses, Donna, was given Annabelle by her mother as a gift. It's believed that the mom bought it at a thrift shop, thus the cursedness. It's not likely you'd find a cursed doll still sealed in the packaging. Stranger things have happened though. While there's no solid proof of this, it's also been said that the spirit of a young girl had found her way into the doll. She was around 7 years old when she was killed in a car accident outside of her home. The girl's name was Annabelle, and she'd managed to possess the toy. The movie posits that Annabelle's parents, inconsolable after her death, searched for ways to get their daughter back. The method they decided upon in the end was to bind her soul to the doll, so that she may have physical form once again. Like most reasonable people, Annabelle wasn't satisfied with being a Pinocchio-style being, and instead wanted to be a real person. This is where the evil activity originates. The movie claims she's always looking for a new body to possess. Other tales claim that the spirit haunted the house that the 2 nurses lived in, and the women gave Annabelle permission to take hold of the doll. This last option is given credence by the treatment given to the doll by the nurses. Donna would treat the doll like a real little girl even as odd things were happening in the home. She even gave Annabelle a little bracelet, which she still wears behind the glass at the museum. Sneaking in at number 3, we've got moving autonomously. What tipped the 2 women off that something was not normal with Annabelle was the fact that she seemed to be able to move around on her own. The doll would move around the house during the day, at first only slightly changing her positions, like crossing and uncrossing her limbs, moving her arms, or tilting her head. Eventually she began relocating to different locations in the house. Donna would leave the doll on the couch, head to work, and would discover the doll in her bedroom upon returning. These small movements became even more concerning when handwritten notes began to be discovered around the house. The fact that the parchment used was unrecognizable was distressing, but not nearly as distressing as the messages written on them. "Help me" was a common missive, scrawled with pencil in childlike lettering. Donna and her roommate chalked this up to be a prank, or maybe the results of someone breaking into the house when they weren't around. However, they began to believe that Annabelle was truly paranormal when she levitated her arms onto the table they were eating at. This was enough to have them contact a psychic and try to figure out what this doll was trying to communicate. It was then that they discovered the young spirit residing within the raggedy plaything. Even years later, when Annabelle was held in the case in the museum, she would appear unexpectedly in the Warrens' home. Clawing its way in at number 2, poor Lou. When Annabelle was discovered to be possessed, nobody would have thought she was evil or malicious. This soon changed though when the fiance of one of the nurses came to visit. Lou would come by the house from time to time and would often sleep over on the couch. One night while dozing on the Chesterfield, Lou woke up in a frenzy. He was scared out of his mind and covered in sweat, claiming to have had a wicked nightmare. In this dream, Annabelle was crawling up his leg, then his shoulders, and then got to his neck. Lou thought she was trying to strangle him to death. This was enough to make him toss Annabelle across the room in anger, shouting that she was nothing more than a doll and that she couldn't hurt anyone. Bad call, Lou. Bad call. This seemed to provoke the demonic presence attached to the Raggedy Ann doll, which then caused 7 psychic wounds to appear on Lou's body. He doubled over in pain with claw-like gashes damaging his skin. But before he could get a good look at the injuries, the incisions disappeared. Definitely more evil than any young girl should ever be. And slinking its way in at number 1, we have a killer history. After the incident with Lou, Annabelle racked up quite the reputation for violence and animus. There's a laundry list of incidents involving her attacks on people trying to do away with evil. Apparently the first time Ed Warren took the doll for safekeeping, he put it in the backseat of his car. While driving away, he experienced car troubles and even encountered a demonic attack similar to the one in Annabelle Comes Home. Even after being placed in the glass case, Annabelle was able to cause problems for all sorts of visitors. A priest came by one day and threw Annabelle across the room, attempting to exorcise the demon from her. He yelled that God is more powerful than the devil and that Annabelle was powerless. Soon after though, this man got in a serious car accident involving a tractor trailer. He survived, living to tell the terrible tale. It's even said that he saw the doll in his rear view mirror right before the collision. An even more bloody tale involves a young man who thought it would be funny to antagonize the demonic doll. Against the advice of all present, he banged on the doll's case and laughed about it. Later, he was killed in a motorcycle crash. Granted, he could have just been a reckless person in general, but the encounter with the doll beforehand is creepy to say the least. Lastly, there was an incident in Thailand in which an elderly man died during a screening of Annabelle Comes Home. The British man was vacationing when he decided to see the latest Haunted Doll feature film. When the lights came up, his body was discovered and he was pronounced dead inside of the theater. This could just be a case of the stress of a horror movie exacerbating pre-existing medical conditions in an old man, but considering all the cursed content related to Annabelle, it's a little extra disturbing. Plus, Annabelle Comes Home is decidedly the least scary of the 3 Annabelle movies, so take that as you will.
Number 5. Thomas Busby's chair. Our first entry actually is in a museum, but the curators have deemed it so haunted and dangerous that they have been forced to take special measures to ensure it doesn't unleash its curse on the museum's patrons. The story begins in North Yorkshire in 1702, when 2 criminals, Daniel Audie and his son-in-law, Thomas Busby, came into conflict. They were coin forgers who essentially ran a criminal empire, but Daniel disapproved of Tom's relationship with his daughter. This resulted in a fight, which ended with Daniel's untimely demise. Thomas was arrested soon afterwards and sentenced to be hung. There is some variation in what happened next. Some versions of the tale say that Thomas was arrested at his favorite pub, and others say he was allowed back into the bar for his last meal before his death. Whatever the case, before being taken away, he told the other patrons of the pub, "May sudden death come to anyone who dare sit in my chair." He was then taken away and hung across the street. As the local historian and poet William Grange described it, the bones of the poor wretch who had committed murder were hung to fester in the sunshine and blow in the tempest, until they fell piecemeal to earth, and tradition yet tells tales of night wanderers being terrified when passing this dreaded spot. While Thomas began apparently haunting the spot across from the inn where his remains were displayed, the curse he laid on the chair began taking effect. Over the years, many brave souls sat on the chair to prove that they were not afraid and paid the price. In 1894, a chimney sweep sat in the chair and was found the next day hanging next to where Busby had been displayed. In 1967, 2 Air Force pilots sat in the chair as a joke, but when they were driving home that night, they crashed into a tree and did not survive. A few years later, a builder sat in the chair and fell off of a roof later that same night. Not long after, a cleaner fell into the chair after slipping while mopping the floor and died of a brain tumor soon afterwards. In 1978, the owner of the now renamed Busby Stoop Inn decided that too many deaths had occurred and donated the chair to the Thirsk Museum. Although they didn't technically lock the chair away, they did hang the chair on a wall, 5 feet off of the ground, to prevent anyone from sitting on it and receiving Busby's fatal curse. Number 4. The Hanging Man Painting. This haunted painting is actually linked to a haunted photograph, making it twice as haunted as most objects on this list. It all started when a photographer named James Kidd took a seemingly innocuous photo of a wooden cart next to a barn. Kidd thought nothing of it until he had the photo developed and saw that a ghostly figure had made its way into the frame. On the left side of the cart, he could see a headless and hanging man. He showed the photos to others who searched for any sign of doctoring, but could find none. It was then that this photo caught the attention of a painter named Laura P. Laura claims that she felt drawn to the image and decided that she had to make an oil painting based on the photograph. While painting the picture, she reported feeling deeply uneasy, but pushed through to finish her art. The painting was hung at a local business, but was soon taken down after it reportedly began moving on its own and caused several important papers to go missing. Laura then put the painting up in her own home, but soon began to experience strange occurrences. These included objects being knocked over or broken, mysterious knocking on the doors, strange leaks, and perhaps most disturbing, the apparition of the headless man in her home. Once word of the haunted painting got out, she received several offers from collectors to buy the painting, but she has so far refused, claiming that she is afraid of what the painting could do in the homes of others. Number 3. The Voynich Manuscript. The Voynich Manuscript is a coded book that was believed to have been written at some point in the early 15th century. It was discovered in a locked chest in Rome in the year 1912, and deciphering its history, and more importantly its meaning, has been the goal of several different scholars for many years before and since. Its first known owner was believed to be Rudolph II. Rudolph apparently thought that the mysterious book had been written by Roger Bacon, and purchased the book for a huge sum of money, roughly 600 ducats of gold. The first 100% confirmed owner of the text was an alchemist named George Barish, who found the mysterious book in his personal library, unsure of its origin. It was passed from him to a variety of scholars, emperors, and officials, all of whom failed to decipher its bizarre text and illustrations. Several of the world's best cryptographers from the First and Second World War have tried to decipher its 240 pages, and have not found any way to read the book. Some of the pictures include detailed sketches of plants that are not found in nature and zodiac signs. As you might expect, there are several theories about the purpose and author of this book, with some believing that it was a herbology text written in a lost shorthand, and others having more outlandish theories that it was created by aliens from another world. One theory is that the book was written by either a demon or the devil himself, and that anyone who manages to translate its contents will unleash a curse upon the world. A theory they believe is bolstered by the fact that several people who have attempted a translation have gone on to suffer several years of bad fortune. Whether the origin of this book is human or demonic in nature, it is still the most mysterious and curiosity-inducing books in human history. Number 2. The Anguished Man. The tale of this rather disturbing-looking painting is strange and steeped in mystery, but every scant piece of information we have on it is more unsettling than the last. The painting of a featureless man who seems to be screaming was apparently painted by a deeply troubled artist who mixed his own blood with his paints in an effort to get the right shade of red. Not long after completing it, the artist took his own life, and the painting found its way into a woman's care. She kept it for many years, but claimed that once she put the painting up, her and her family began to see a dark, shadowy figure roaming about her house. At night, they would hear strange sounds like footsteps and crying. The woman took the painting down and kept it in her attic for 25 years until she died, leaving the painting to its current caretaker, Sean Robinson. Sean had been warned by his grandmother that the painting was haunted, but he thought little of it. Robinson kept the painting in his basement for about a decade before rediscovering it and putting it up. Once again, the family began seeing the dark, shadowy figure roaming the halls and hearing the sound of weeping and moaning during the night. Sean began leaving a camera on by the painting to try and get evidence of its paranormal nature, and upon reviewing the footage, heard some odd noises and saw evidence of doors opening and closing, seemingly by themselves, and the painting falling over onto the ground. As time went on, the activity became more and more intense, with his wife seeing a strange mist and an unseen force pushing his son down the stairs. Things went from bad to worse when guests who came to see the painting began reporting intense and sudden nosebleeds. Sean takes the painting out from time to time to show it to paranormal investigators in television programs who want to hear his story. But otherwise, the Anguished Man is apparently kept locked away in a safe location to prevent any further harm from coming to unwitting people. Number 1. The Bassano Vase. Although it has fallen out of favor now, for centuries, a common gift given to brides on the day of their weddings were intricate, ornate vases. Our next tale begins in the 15th century in Italy, and spans over 500 years. Legend says that on the day of her wedding, a bride in a village near Napoli found a gift with no clue which of the guests had given it to her. It was a 4-pound silver vase. She decided to put it in her room for safekeeping before the wedding ceremony. But when the ceremony was due to start, the bride was nowhere to be found. The groom went to her room to look for her, and found her lifeless body on the ground, with no trace of what had caused the death, other than her desperately clutching the silver vase. The bride was buried, and the vase was passed on to one of her family members to be taken care of. Within days, the second member of the family was dead from unknown causes. The vase was given to another member of the family, and when he also passed away, the family made the connection between all the recent tragedies and the Bassano vase. Unsure of what to do, they reached out to a local priest, who upon hearing the story, informed them that whoever had given it to the bride had either cursed it or made it from cursed materials. He advised them to bury it on sacred ground. They dug a hole and wrote a note, warning, "Beware, this vase brings death," which they placed in the cursed vase. The vase was buried and remained underground for the next 500 years. By horrible chance, a man in 1988 was digging and came across the vase. He read the note, but being the skeptical type, discarded it and took the newly found Bassano vase to a local auction house. The vase went up for auction and was sold for the equivalent of $2,270 to a local pharmacist. Within 3 months, the pharmacist was dead, and the vase was sold by his family to a local doctor, who also passed away soon after. The vase developed a reputation after this, and several people who were approached to purchase it refused. But it was eventually bought by an archaeologist, who, despite his family's protests, did not believe in curses. He died 3 months later. His family threw the vase out their window, but a police officer who was passing by saw this and tried to return it. The family refused the vase back and told him of its cursed nature. He tried to give it to multiple different museums, but having heard about the curse, they all refused. Fearing for his life, he did what the bride's family had done over 500 years prior and buried it in a lead box in a cemetery. Which cemetery he used is unknown, but let us hope that no unwitting soul rediscovers this cursed vase and unleashes it upon humanity once again.